Okay, thank you. Yes, a warm welcome from my side. So as you see, the title, Trends in International Expertising, Technical Innovations, Use of Databases and AI, which is questionable whether that is true or not, but we will see. So the first thing basically, no. Okay. When we talk about technical innovations, I want to have a difference between software innovations or programs and hardware. And I will go through each of these categories and try to explain you what current experts use in order to come to a good conclusion. Now, as for software, many of you probably know the software Photoshop. Some of you may even use it, and some of you may even use it for philatelic purposes, creating pages for exhibitions or whatsoever. But actually, with Photoshop and other programs of that kind, you can do much more in philatelic expertising, such as you can overlay overprints cancellations with a congruence check, which basically means if the cancellation on the item in question is the same size and shape as your comparison material. You can do this old-fashioned style with a copied foil on overhead, but this is much more detailed and you can zoom in and zoom out, but we'll get to that later. Also, some of you may have experienced, you have a stamp, maybe a dark blue stamp or a dark violet stamp where the cancellation is hardly visible. With the help of the software, you can make it readable, and oftentimes the date of the cancellation is very essential in determining whether the cancellation is good or not, or within the period of use or whatever. And also, believe it or not, you can make some color comparisons. And you can document your work, which, at least in my belief, basically for every certificate I write, I have a documentation of the steps I did in order to come to my conclusion. So at the end, there's not only the certificate, but whenever I do like plating a stamp or checking the congruence of the cancellations, I will save all this. And this is my documentation that I have. So I can always tell people I just didn't look at the stamp for 10 seconds. I actually worked on the stamp to come to a proper conclusion. Now, let's see if that works here. Just a sec. Okay, I need to shift that because actually I prepared some videos here to better explain.
Get back to the...
Yeah, it's okay. I just shifted here.
Okay.
It's all good. So basically here I created this little screen video to show you what I do in Photoshop. So basically there you have a stamp in question, right? And for overprints or even normal stamps, a normal procedure in saying something is genuine or not, you need to specify the plate position. Okay, this is rather easy because it has a sheet margin. Anyway, what I do, I have a full sheet where I extract the cancellation and overlay this onto the patient. And then if it completely matches, you can be sure that the overprint there really comes from position probably like 40 or 50, what it is here in that example. Yeah, and this is what I do with cancellations, with overprints, and you can use it for many other things. If you have like a full sheet, you extract the overprint and you can place it on any patient within a few seconds, and you know very fast whether the overprint is good or not. Now, okay. The next thing, I have another video. Internet seems not the fastest here. No? Now it loads. Okay, very good. So same example, basically. You have a stamp, and based on some characteristics, you are very sure its position, let's say 12 or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Then you grab the position from your comparison sheet and you overlay. And even though you see many of the characteristics of the overprint match, you can see that the vertical alignment of all the rows, it doesn't match. This is because, and we know this for many areas, that stamps have been reprinted or overprints have been reproduced from the original die. But oftentimes the forger or reprinter, whatever we want to call it, didn't take enough care to also check the vertical or horizontal alignment. This is why it's always important not to just check a few specific features of an overprint, but to actually superimpose an overprint from the specific sheet onto your patient so you can be sure everything matches, not just a few specific items. Like, this is the problem with many of the old books, right? Many of you probably know the Serrano Guide. It's basically like a book that tells you, look here, look there, and then the stamp is either genuine or not. But oftentimes, this is not enough, because obviously, when the book is out like this, also the forgers know the typical characteristics of a genuine item. So there's more to it than just following a few steps in a book. Okay. Next one. This is the example I just showed in the video. And here you basically see the patient and that break here in the Roman number 1, and you have the same break here, right? So you would think it comes from the same position, everything is good, and it's not a super expensive stamp, but a couple €100. But then, as you've seen in the video, when you superimpose the image, the alignment just doesn't fit. And funnily enough, this only happens on the rare stamps. So that kind of gives you the idea of what happened there. Okay, next video. This is what I said for many stamps. It's important that you can read the cancellation date, right? In order to really say, okay, it's a genuine cancellation. And in this example, we will even see that it's very difficult to just see the town of the cancellation. Yes. Unfortunately, the internet is slow. Okay, there we are. Okay, next example. So you see here a dark violet stamp, black overprint, and the black cancellation. Usually not the best surroundings to say which cancellation has been struck on the item. So basically here, what I'm doing, I'm extracting the colors I don't need, right? And then finally you can see the cancellation. You can see everything. You can see Stanislaw, the post office, even the date, and which sub-post office it was. So this helps you within a few seconds to really say, okay, it fits, and then you can overlay the genuine cancellation again on that image and see if it fits. Same game here with an orange stamp. The cancel basically was not readable. And there you are. You can read it just perfect. Which basically means whenever you read a certificate and think, why in the hell does the expert write something about the date? I cannot even read it. He may have done something like that in order to gain the information later stated in the certificate. Okay, last video, I think. Just another example. Sometimes, especially when you have handover prints on rare stamps, right? I mean, you have it for a lot of areas, the French colonies, German colonies, whatsoever. And oftentimes, these are expensive stamps, but sometimes when struck very weak or just too little ink has been applied, you can try to further bring out the overprint in order to see some of the characteristics. And when it loads, I will show you that. There. Okay, you see the overprint, but it's rather weak. and not really enough to say whether it's good or not. But with a few tricks you can play here, you have at least an image of the overprint, which you can actually overlay on with the genuine one again. See, then you say, okay, everything matches, and then there are a few more steps you can take, but I will get to that later. Okay, the last one, this is very specific. For many cancellations, overprints, stamps, the ink that has been used for printing the stamp, applying the overprint or the cancellation is very specific, especially for many of these local issues. Why is that? Because the time that was used to create these issues was always very limited, and we know that the quantity of the stamps printed was also very low, which in general means the printer or whoever did it only did the color once, right? For 200 stamps, you don't need 2 big pots of color. You have 1 small pot of color, which is usually very, very specific in the pigment structure if you use a microscope. Now, the problem with the microscope, if you use like with a transmitted light microscope, I will show you here. You can take many pictures, but due to the magnification, sometimes 600 times magnification, it's only sharp on a few instances. And what you can do in order to have a better comparison image how a pigment structure should look like, it's called stacking. So for each level, you take 1 picture, and then it's a stacking software. You load all the images into the stacking software, and it just grabs all the sharp parts of the image and combines it into one. So for your comparison file, you later have 1 file which shows the exact pigment structure you require for something to be genuine. Okay, now we get to another software, basically. I talked about this half an hour ago. Not in general now Profi, but in general databases you create in order to have fast access to any information you may need for expertising. So basically here, I talked about this. We created a huge database with 3 million entries currently. And of course, we use it for the auction house, but also we can use it as an expert to find comparison material. Because oftentimes for a cancel in question or a stamp in question, a rate in question, whatever you can think of, it's important to find comparison material, and that rather fast. And so databases like this, you can obviously use to find certain cancellations and whatever you need to compare with the patient in front of you. Like here, an example, if you have an item like this, the modern systems, like the one we created, it just traces with image recognition, basically. It takes 1 million images in a folder, and the system later on understands which images show the exact same stamp. So not alike, but the exact same item. So this wouldn't be confused with the reprint or so, right? This would always find this item X, Lorenzen, Engelau, and Ferrari. And this kind of technique obviously helps you to dive into these gigantic files you have, right? If you combine everything you have millions of images to search, and to do this in the traditional way is simply not feasible if you want to do it worldwide. Yeah, this is just the details you see for every item then, where it was sold at Cornfieler 1981 and at Ferrari 1923. So all this is digital now. Okay, this search can help you to answer some questions. This may sound, it was in one of our Erivan sales. And the interesting thing is this cancellation here is the Hamburg cancellation, right? It was applied upon arrival because the stamps weren't canceled when posted or in transit. And when I searched our database, to find more information about this because I thought, oh, okay, it's a nice item. I know it. The cancellation looks okay to me, but it's always a problem when you have a rarity and it's one of its kind and you have nothing to compare it to. You always get suspicious. Now, what can you do? I searched through all our old catalogs and I found this item in a sale run 1938. And the description says, well, and blah, blah, blah. And in addition, the same cover, but uncancelled. So we know it was a correspondence and they, for whatever reason, just did it with one. But we know there's a correspondence. We know there is another one without cancellation. So it seems logical that one may have been canceled by the post office, right? So this just gives more, information for you to expertise it correctly at the end of the day. With these sort of techniques, you can also trace images because expertising, obviously quality is a big part of expertising. And this is not necessarily about quality, but basically it's the same. The systems like that can track how an item changes over time, okay? So here you see the item as it was sold in the Caspari sale. And sometime between the Caspari and the Lilly sale, someone decided, I don't like the upper margin. It's not straight. So I just cut the upper margin straight. Right? So, and you can do this with all items you can imagine, and you see how they oftentimes get worse over time. And this is what it looks today. Another one, this is one of my private databases I use for expertising. Basically, it's again all about gathering information, especially when I started expertising, I think 15 years ago. I was fortunate enough to buy all the old certificates of my predecessors, right? And it's always interesting what the old experts had to say about an item. They may not have always been right, but it's interesting to gather that information. And basically what I did, I had a student who typed in 5,000 certificates for me in an Excel spreadsheet. And we scanned all the certificates. And now I can say, okay, I need all of this catalog number with this cancellation. And then you can see right away how the stamp has been used with that cancellation in a typical way. And if you have a patient in front of you, which differs from the rest of the picture, you think, okay, something maybe fishy here, right? So and all this you can do without very deep expertise in stamps, right? You see a pattern, the patient doesn't match the pattern, something may be wrong. Okay, provenance research, maybe also, or it's as important today in expertising as quality. So you have an item like this in front of you, and you go into your file, and you find something like this, which used to be a block of 6. And I think, let me check here. No, it was last offered like this 1936 or something. Okay, but I can trace it back. And now, if I now superimpose my patient onto that, I see that the block must have been split. But it's still an interesting story, right? You see, obviously, that the double overprints are all heavily shifted, and they are not struck twice, just a few millimeters apart. These are all important pieces for the puzzle to understand what a genuine double overprint looks like. Okay, hardware. So far for the software, obviously there are many hardware things you can do today in expertising. The first, the Royal has one, we have one, some other philatelic experts have one. The VSC 8000, a video spectral comparator. It's a very fine piece of technology, very expensive, but very fun. Basically what it does, it has, let's say, 500 or 600, I don't know the exact number, different light sources that you can put on the stamp. And you can use it in different combinations by side light, transmitted light, whatever you want to do. And oftentimes with Heinrich Köhler and Kornfieler, what we use it most for is you have a patient in front of you, and you know there are similar items like this. So what we do, we have this stamp here, and we see how the overprint or the cancellation or the stamp itself reacts under certain filters. And the nice thing about this piece of technology is when you found a specific setting for a stamp or an overprint where it reacts a certain way, you can save the filter. And later, if you have the next patients, because this is always the problem, right? You need to look at it with the same eyes, in the same conditions to really compare something. But you can see here, basically it saves all the settings we use, and then we save that as a reference file. And when the next patient comes up, we just pull the reference file, and the reaction needs to be in the way we see here. And then we can say, okay, it reacts like the patient before, which was genuine. So the chances are very high it's also genuine. A few more examples. Actually, a cheap stamp, not that easy to, I don't know, like €100 maybe, trade value. But still, these are two different papers, and under some filters, you can see it right away, right? So we save it, and the next time before we offer it and we get it returned because we were too stupid to understand what the difference is, we use that and can be sure we sell what we describe. Okay, it's very German and very typical. The printing run of this is very low. There are about 150 genuine specimens of this known, but in circulation are many thousand. And this is what all the experts always cry about, that everyone sends them only the fake stuff, right? So when you have the genuine one and you have the same filter here, and you see basically the reaction is inverted, right? Once you have a glowing white overprint and once you have a black overprint. Although when you look with the standard light, both red. It looks exactly the same under natural light, right? So people are confused. But when we know this and found this out, we will, next time we have an item like this, we just take the stamp, pull the filter, put the stamp under, and we know whether it's good or bad within a matter of seconds. And this basically we're doing for the whole world. Here, another interesting example. There has been a long discussion on it's Hamburg, Michel number 8. It's a lilac stamp, and there has been a long discussion whether all the colors just arise from deterioration over time, sun exposure or whatever. But when you look at it under specific filters, you see that the reaction is so different, it must have been a different color used. Not only sunlight can do this. But this also helps to weed out, now this is all the colors the stamp shows. And now you know, okay, this is the expensive stamp. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish in natural light, okay? But with filters like this, sometimes you just stick it under and see, okay, it's so different, it has to be the good one. And this turns out to be like I want to say, when we send it out then for external expertising, success rate of 99%. Also, very famous for German philately. I'm sorry I couldn't find so much for Danish philately. The hand stamp overprints, right? Very expensive. And here, this is the typical reaction of the genuine overprints. You see this glow, right? This whitish glow. And this here, it's just completely dead, the overprint. And the problem is the very old experts, they didn't go by these means, right? They checked if the overprint has the same dimensions, the same whatever, the right cancellation, and then it was genuine. Today we know better. And we can sort out these sort of things and don't offer them. Same here, it goes on and on. It's always the same basically, right? You have, it's a very difficult stamp, but here you see the outlines of the overprint, typical reaction, and on, let's say 95% of the forgeries, no reactions. So basically what we do, we can save lots of time and money because we don't need to send it to the expert. We don't need to pack it. We don't need to pay the expert €50 to tell us it's a forgery and all these sort of things that we can build over time with this machine. Yeah, same game here. You have the reprint, which you can buy in sheets basically, but which is often confused with the genuine one. And this is what the genuine one looks like. right? It's very easy. It's glowing again, and it's oranges. Same here, and you can play this with almost every stamp. You can play it. It always takes a bit of time to find the correct filters, but you can play it with a lot of material and weed out all the not so good stuff beforehand. And this is just for reference purposes, right? If you have, again, a Parahiba provisional, you can look at it, you see the dimensions, you see the way it shines under certain lights. So basically what we do is building a worldwide comparison database for all sort of material. This is a funny story. The Sperati forgeries. Most of the Sperati forgeries are easy to tell apart because most of the times Ferrari used a different printing method, right? All his forgeries basically are lithography, basically, and many of the stamps he forged were typography or whatever. But for Oldenburg, the problem is that the printing method used both is lithography, the original stamps and the forgery. But also there, if you look under natural light, the shades are exactly the same. So basically what you need to do, either you know it by heart or you grab the Sperati book and you look for the specifics of the Sperati forgery. But we found out that, again, under a certain filter setting, the originals stay dead and the forgeries glow white. And it works 100% of the time. Okay. Another thing are repairs and enhancement to any item you can think of. Now here, this is also under the VSC, right? If you look with the naked eye, it's here, it's the exact same yellow. Only under certain filters, again, you see it just completely pops out, right? You don't need to understand a lot about stamps and see something is very different there, which basically means this was all gone, has been added and painted in. Okay. Another technology now. A typical stereo microscope, okay? Not as fancy as the VSC 8000, but you can still do some fun stuff with it. So this is what I have at home. I have a camera mounted on it to take pictures of what I see and document. There you see what I can see through the microscope, and you can use, again, side light, transmitted light, whatever you want. This is a transmitted light microscope, oftentimes used from doctors to check your blood or whatever they can do with it. But this is interesting. You can go up to, with this here, 630 times magnification onto a stamp. But then, obviously, you don't see much of the stamp anymore. By 630 times magnification, the only thing you see is pigment structure, paper fibers, and whatsoever. Now, few examples using these two microscopes, what you can do when you expertise. So here we have, it's a very expensive cover. It's like a 20,000-30,000 euro cover. Unfortunately, something is wrong. So basically, and it's very hard to see, but you see here, there's a slight difference in the color. Basically, what happened, the stamp was completely torn. Right here. You may see it now when you know it. The stamp was completely torn and put back together. It was very nice work, but with a microscope and some pictures, you can actually find this out later on. This here also a very nice example, genuine cancellation and so on. It looks very nice. But now if you look the side light, right? You see this part has all been added off the paper. I don't know if you see the break in here. There's a typical break where the paper structure doesn't match the other paper structure, right? And the rest of the yellow here, it's all painted in by hand. It's not natural, and it's really amazing what these people can do when painting in very, very small detail. Nah. Okay, it's not a very expensive cover. This is just to show that these things which are quite the effort, right? To add paper and paint something in. It's done also to items in the range of 100 to 200 euro, where you would think, why on earth would anyone do this for a 200 euro item? Okay, little close up. Anyone notice anything? Okay, and you see the corner was gone and all this here is painted again. Right, you can see it's not the same color and you can actually see where the dots were made. Yeah, and on a big image, it's very clear, but also when you use the microscope with side light, it really pops out. You just need to do it 10, 20 times, then you can do it. It's very easy. This is under UV, you can see it directly. Okay, another example. This is not good. I want this to go away. Okay. A good stamp, it had an old certificate, but do you see here? It's a little grayish, brownish, whatever. And I thought, okay, something is wrong. But usually when things are on piece, it's even harder to expertise, right? Because when you use transmitted light, the light power is not always strong enough to get through all the layers of paper, and you don't want to use too high power of light because that will burn your stamp. Okay, and now when we look close, this here is exactly the line where the two perforations have been added. Do you see the paper structure is different? You see where the break is here. You see single paper fibers from where the perf has been torn out and added. But many of these restorations are done so good, you actually need a transmitted light microscope to verify, right? You can say with a magnifying glass, you say, something is wrong. But to actually prove that it's wrong or good, which you should do when writing certificates, you need a transmitted light microscope. Yeah, that's just another picture, same scene. Okay. Also there, I show you how tiny, and you may think completely useless sometimes the works are that are taken out on these little stamps, okay? Just this here, just the perf tip has been added, right? You can see it again because the paper fibers are different, the structure, and it's not a thin or anything. You can really see where the two paper parts go back together. So basically for like no fault at all, this is what people do. Okay, very expensive cover. And also here you will see, oh, maybe you don't see it at the first glimpse, but the whole corner here has been added and from here also painted in. And you see this much better in the next picture. Here, I call it, you can really see the surgeon stitches. Do you see this here? How the paper fibers overlap? It's like, because they do it like a surgeon. They can pack it all back together, every stamp. It's very amazing what they can do. Yeah, there, another close-up. And it needs some training, but then it really pops out. Okay. Different technique again, before and after in databases. Quite fun. We have that stamp. Very nice stamp. Offered somewhere in the 1980s. Very nice stamp. This is what it looked like in 1935. The left margin missing. And obviously then part of the cancellation painted in to disguise that the margin has been added. Right? So also with this technique, databases, you can find out a lot what has been done to items. And yeah. There you see it in the, this is how it looks in the database at the end. And you see right away, okay, something is wrong there. But you see, it sold very recently with a certificate, which probably did not mention the problem. Okay. Another example. Unfortunately, we sold that in 2009, I believe. But what we didn't know back then is that there was a tear, which later on has been restored. It had a good certificate and sold. Right here, you see it was in 2009, we sold it. And funnily enough, we sold it in 1935 also, but in a bit different condition. Yeah, some other examples, what you can do with an archive. Nice multiple. But then you see, magically, the corner has been added. Right, and all this you can see just building an archive. You don't need to understand how paper restoration or anything works. It's just that you track the items you're interested in. Or here, I mean, it's a nice item, but as someone didn't like how it looked here, what did they do? They cut it up here, restored this. And how can you tell? Because there may be other items like this around, but you always find like specific inclusions in the paper or something where you can say, okay, this is the exact same item. Yeah. And I think, yeah, this is also a very nice example how experts can fall into interesting traps. Because when you expertise something like this, your focus is going to be on that stamp because this is the expensive stamp, right? So most experts, you look at it and say, okay, I will very, very thoroughly look at the 30 Kreuzer stamp because that's the expensive part of the game here. Okay. But in reality, what we want to look at is the cheap 3 Kreuzer. Okay, it looks a nice stamp. No problems, one would think. But then you look back then in a paper archive, and you see that the complete right perforation was clipped when offered in a Robson Lowe sale 1970. Right? And because what I just said, also experts, they look at the expensive stamp, but the problem is you have to look at every single aspect of the item. Otherwise, you will fall into very mean traps. And if there you see a little close-up, it's not so good because it's an old photocopy. But there you see, and even with a microscope, after I knew what has been done, I think it took me 20 minutes to find where exactly the perforation was added and which parts of the cancellation was drawn in. Even you knew. This is how good this was done. Yes, that's the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Very interesting indeed. There must be millions of questions.
Yeah, any questions? Sad. I try not to.
How do we get in touch with the bloke that did the review?
Sorry, what?
How do we get in touch with the chap that did the review?
You know, if you want, I can tell you a bit more about this specific thing. In order to understand how these people work, I work together with a student in Germany. You can study paper conservation in Cologne and in Stuttgart. And I went to a professor in Stuttgart and asked if I can get in contact with her students. And at the end of the day, one of the students made her master thesis on stamp repairs. And basically, we knew which techniques were used, which actually have been used since around 1800. But back then to repair old masters and that kind of stuff, right? And the technique used most of the times, there are multiple techniques, but the most dangerous technique, at least to my knowledge, experience, is what's called the invincible repair. The real introduction was done by 2 brothers. They were restorations in Berlin in the 1930s. And it's called Schweidlerization. because the brothers, their name was Schweitler, and one of them wrote a book about all the techniques. You can still buy it. And the second edition of the book also has specific hints for the stamp repairs. So, and basically there, everything is described, how they do it, and yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Get away from this. Many of these things are minor details, so it doesn't necessarily qualify the stamps as a forgery. So what should we?
No, but certainly. Okay, yeah, basically the question was, if I understood you correctly, if it really matters for small value items, what I just said. Correct? Yes. That's a good question that everyone has to decide for himself. But at the end of the day, as a professional in the trade, I can tell you that quality does matter. And yeah, at the end, it's your own choice. But the thing is, even with smaller items that maybe are rare, I'm not saying that we can't trade this sort of stuff. I'm just saying that there should be mentioning of these circumstances, right? Because you may still need it for an exhibition because it's one of a kind. So at the end, the collector may not care whether a small tear has been closed. This discussion actually is very specific for philately. If you go into art and everything, people just accept that the stuff has been restored. It's just because in philately, most of the stuff that has been done is deceptive, right? And to cheat people. And in art, this was always known and accepted. That's maybe the difference.
I assume that many of these repairs would not be discovered. Collector will not see it, okay, and
No.
auction house will not
In
see it.
a collector that doesn't necessarily see it, but in other talks on different topics, I always give hints how you can at least see a lot of it for an investment with maybe less than 100 euro, right? There is enough stuff around for less than 100 euro, which puts you at least into the position to see a lot of that. Not everything, but a lot.
How much are those colour spectrum machines? What are they worth? Those VSC.
What they cost?
Yeah.
Around 80,000 plus VAT. Euro, not Danish crowns. Yes. AI? Quite frankly, for me, AI is still sort of a buzzword. and what we use here, what I showed you, where the image recognition matches the same item, at the end of the day, it's simple pattern recognition, right? And this is most of what AI is. It's pattern recognition, nothing more in reality.
Interesting. Are there any more questions?
Good. Then thank you.